The Ford F-150 has been America's best-selling pickup for over 25 years, and it's no surprise with Ford's consistently bold styling and powerful engine. The one thing they have consistently lacked, however, is the ground clearance necessary to make it a serious off-road performer. Fortunately, Superlift Suspension Systems has recognized this shortfall and come up with the ultimate solution, a complete 4.5-inch lift system. Ford has utilized independent front suspension with torsion bars since 1997. Now, with the introduction of the 2004 model, Ford stuck with the same basic design. They did, however, make one critical change, and that's replacing the torsion bars with a coilover strut. Now, the result is ride and handling better than any previous model, but the downside is the F-150 now sits lower to the ground than it ever has before. So, how does one go about solving the ground clearance problem without sacrificing the already excellent factory ride? Well, such was the challenge that faced the engineers at Superlift, and their answer was applying their frame-integrated technology, or F.I.T, design concept. Now, we'll get more into exactly what F.I.T is in just a minute, but the result of their efforts is what you see here, a complete 4.5-inch suspension system that offers the best of both worlds, dramatically improved ground clearance and room for larger tires with no sacrifices in the ride and handling department. Well, let's see what this kit includes. First up are front and rear cross members. Now, these drop the position of the lower control arms 4 inches. Now, spanning the two control arms is this giant high clearance belly pan assembly. Now, the rear cross member incorporates one differential mount. There are 2 additional differential drop brackets, coil strut spacers, anti-sway bar drop brackets, and brake line drop brackets. But perhaps the most critical components in this system are these replacement nodular iron knuckles. Now, these babies perform several critical functions in one compact package, and that lends simplicity to the system. In fact, there are among the fewest parts here of any IFS lift system, and that greatly eases installation and makes the kit more cost competitive. But don't think for a second that just a few parts here means that Superlift cut any corners. Everything you need to be concerned about when lifting a truck has been addressed, and I can prove it. So let's take a tire off and have a closer look. Now, with the tire off, you can see that after the lift is installed, you have a clean, attractive package. Now, first off, why the replacement knuckles? Well, they're actually the first key ingredient in the F.I.T design concept. You'll notice that the upper control arm remains in the factory location, while the lower control arm has been relocated 4 inches downward. The knuckles' longer neck spans the increased distance between the control arms, and it's actually much beefier than the original piece. Now, it's done this way for a couple of reasons. Number one, the upper control arm is actually mounted on top of the frame, so lowering it is impractical. And 2, the design is much simpler than relocating all of the front suspension components. Now, you'll also notice that the tie rod mounting boss has been raised in order to correct the steering geometry. No other steering correction is required, and the rack and pinion can remain in the factory location, which again just simplifies the installation. Another key benefit to the knuckle design is that there is no increase in front track width, and there are no camber or toe changes throughout the suspension's travel cycle. As I mentioned earlier, Ford's major suspension revision for the 2004 model was replacing the torsion bars with these coilover shocks, also sometimes called a coil strut. Now, in order to gain the actual lift with this system, Superlift utilizes these coil towers to space down the factory pieces. Now, this method ensures that factory ride quality will be retained because the original coil is still in place and it hasn't been preloaded in any way. Well, now, let's head up front and check out the guts to this system. We'll talk more about this stainless steel skid plate in just a minute, but right now I need to get it out of the way in order to show you another key ingredient to F.I.T technology. Now, one-piece front and rear cross members relocate the lower control arms, but they're stitched in place with this unique high-clearance belly pan. Now, it would have been pretty easy to just put a flat plate here, but look at all the ground clearance that's gained by contouring the pan to get every last bit of available clearance. Now, you'll also notice the pan spans the full width and length of the front suspension, so everything remains well protected. Now, all of the load-bearing bracketry is constructed out of 1/4-inch thick steel, so you know you have one exceptionally strong subframe assembly here. And as an added touch, the belly pan is held in place with countersunk fasteners. Now, this keeps the undercarriage looking clean and helps make sure the bolts stay tight for the service life of the truck. Now, at this point, some of you may be wondering about the difficulty of the installation. Actually, it's very straightforward. However, there is some minor trimming and welding required. Check it out. After disassembling the front suspension, use the supplied template to mark your trim line on the driver's side of the frame. Once your line is set, use a torch or plasma cutter to trim the frame. Then weld in the supplied piece. Once that's done, you can hang the differential using the supplied drop brackets. Like the lower control arms, the differential is lowered a full 4 inches, and that means that the CV axle angles remain within factory specifications. Also, there are no modifications required to the front differential housing, and the front drive shaft is retained. Now, as with any lift system, the ability to get and maintain alignment is absolutely critical. What Ford doesn't tell you when you go buy a new F-150 is that alignment is set at the factory. If the truck ever needs to be realigned for any reason, such as when you install a lift, you are required to buy a set of special adjustment bolts from the dealer. Unfortunately, they run about $250 a set, and that means added expense to the overall cost of the lift. Now, recognizing that this would be an unforeseen expense to the end consumer, Superlift took an equally effective but much more cost-conscious approach by utilizing these cam bolts here. Now, they have the same adjustment range as the expensive factory pieces, and they are included with every single one of these lift systems. Now, that is a nice touch, don't you think? Well, that wraps things up here, so let's head to the back. In the rear, we have a traditional solid axle suspended by leaf springs. As a result, rear lift is very straightforward. Now, these trucks have a pretty substantial nose-down rake from the factory, so rear lift is accomplished via a 2-inch add-a-leaf incorporated into the rear spring pack. Now, this add-a-leaf is designed specifically to combat axle wrap-up and keep the truck's good ride characteristics intact. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that Superlift incorporates rear compression stop extensions into the lift. That's something not a lot of other lift companies address. Rounding things out in the rear, of course, is replacement shock absorbers. Well, that covers the basics of Superlift's F.I.T series system for the F-150. Now let's take a look at some of the optional accessories available designed to enhance the looks and performance of your truck.